Hi, hello. Welcome to another episode of Isaiah's Newsstand. It's your host, Isaiah Edwards. The date is May 30th, 2023. Hopefully, this episode finds you well, in good spirits, and high hopes. As for me, I'm doing pretty good. We're so back, baby. I know, yet again, you guys are saying, what the fuck? Like, you always take Mondays off. I never hear you. What are you talking about? Well, I just took a day off from my Patreon shit. You know what I mean? My little I don't know what you call those episodes. Paywall episodes. Sure, fine. It was a good day off though. It was a good Memorial Day weekend. We really enjoyed ourselves. Sorry to the newsies, ooh, my bad. Mea culpa. But yeah, I mean, I feel good. I definitely feel rested. I did a lot of sleeping throughout the weekend. Obviously, my sleep schedule is still trash. Sleeping at all hours, whenever, however I can get it. But like Monday, I was just like zonked for most of the day. But that being said, I do have a food corner to get into that I want to debrief on. I went to Northside for a little cookout with the homies. I was thinking about this. Like, I really do feel like an honorary Northside resident, even though, like, obviously I don't live there. It's just like I love seeing all my homies there. I love all the friends I've made there. It's nice. So like these cookouts have kind of become like an annual thing. So it's just nice to see the homies and everyone's kind of been building on it. Like, I don't know, the food this time, to me, it's always good. It's always burgers, it's always dogs. So I'm always fucking happy. But this time, someone made, on top of all that, they made carne asada steak. That was on the table. There was so much dip, like guacamole. I think there was like a buffalo cheese dip. There was a lot. It was awesome. I was there was fudgesicles, popsicles. We really did it up this year. It was really cute, and I brought some Oreos. So there you go. I was like, here you go. I hope this is a little measly, meager offering, but everyone was eating them, and I was like, thank God, awesome. Because I feel like something that kind of happens is someone's gonna ask me, oh, bring something to the cookout. This time no one asked me. I just brought it, but I always clam up and I'm like, I'm not cooking anything. Like, yeah, I cook. I cook for myself. No one should be eating these meals outside of me. I don't want to put anybody in danger. You feel me? I don't want anyone's taste buds to be like scarred for life. So I'm like, I clam up. I don't know what to do. So I always like go for chips, and inevitably, like three or four, or five of us are gonna bring a bunch of chips. So it's like always way too much chips. This time it was a nice balance of everything, and here I am just bringing in some little iced cookies. Let's go. We were good to go. So yeah, my weekend was solid. It was good. We're right back at it now. It's Tuesday. It's fucking Tuesday, bruv. So yeah, we got some news, a little bit of catch up. I don't know, like I wouldn't say it was slow. I try to avoid that moniker because I feel like it's not real anymore in a digital age that we have. Like, there's always news to pick up. But I just felt like, oh, maybe some of these stories aren't developed enough yet for me to really want to talk about them, or they're just stories that I feel like, I don't feel like covering this or that, So here we are. We got a little bit of a roundup, so we can go ahead and get to it. But speaking of roundup, I got a little bit of breakdown before I get into this. Ooh. All right. All right. We have an update from Turkey. The second round of elections took place over the weekend. From the Associated Press, Turkey's Erdogan wins another term as president, extends rule into third decade. My man has been out at this shit for 20 years. He's been in office. And boy, has Turkey changed along the way with him at the helm. Now, granted, obviously, this is a newer front to me. Like, I'm learning as I go. Actually, related, unrelated, I have this thing because I do podcasting because I love podcasts. So naturally, when I'm at work, when I'm pissing off, I love listening to whatever I can get my hands on that's interesting. A lot of the breakdown is news, then history, and then like miscellaneous stuff. So when it comes to history, I love the history of nations, like how they came to be. So lately, some of the shit that's been on deck, history of England, and then just recently I got into the history. I think that the podcast is called the history of Turkey or something like that. You can probably look it up and find that. But I mean, so far I'm loving it. I've known a little bit about like Chinese history, Mongolian history, and it's cool to finally see where Turkey kind of fits in here. And then also from like the Roman side that they get involved, with the Romans and all this kind of stuff, or the Byzantines, what have you. So it's just very interesting to kind of connect the dots and and the pieces of the puzzle. But I mean, obviously we're talking about Turkey today. So let's go ahead and do some reading. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan won re-election Sunday, extending his increasingly authoritarian rule into a third decade as the country reels from high inflation and the aftermath of an earthquake that leveled entire cities. So, I mean, this is obviously a long read. It's maybe not obviously, but the Associated Press gives it, a lot of coverage. I just want to kind of give you guys a quick summary. Like I said, this is a runoff. His opponent was Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. And I mean, Kemal was already down, I believe, around 5 points going into it. When we last reported, it was kind of like, oh, okay, maybe we'll see where things land. In the meantime, we'll see, what kind of, politicking gets done and how people are going to vote. It seemingly, though, is a landslide. Let's see. I'm trying to think how much he won by. It was a pretty steep majority. It was even to the point where they hadn't, like, counted some of the outside votes, but they're like, no, we just have enough of the majority of the votes, and it's a wrap. Like, it's over for Kemal. So, Erdogan, claimed victory, and I mean, in a way, this wasn't surprising. I think for me looking at it, I really thought that, like, okay, it was really close going into it. Yeah, Kemal's like behind, but I just would think like people literally have a 20-year history of Erdogan, and you see where your country was supposed to be going. You see where your country is at. And most importantly, the earthquakes that took place between, Turkey and Syria, and to just see literally Erdogan was paying people to not do proper construction on their buildings that crumbled to pieces in this earthquake. Like, you don't need a better example. But I've heard tons of, like interviews from, people in Turkey who were like, no, Erdogan is fine. Like, I even heard one person say, I would give 20 years of my own life so that Erdogan could have 20 years more in office. And that statement to me by someone just like blew my scalp back. The closest I can get to that kind of zealotry was back in the Obama days. I was just like, man, like that Barack Obama, he's really gonna do it. I'd really love if he won, man. That would be great. And then he won, and I was so stoked. For like a year, I was like so hyped. I was like, yeah, let's go. We did it. Change. And I mean that faded. You know what I mean? When the rubber really met the road, and like, especially when you look back at the 8 years that he had, and like what got done, what didn't get done, you just go, oh, ew. Like, I mean, he was good for the tan suit meme and a lot of like just empty promises. So it is what it is. Another fucking president. I couldn't imagine being that devoted, that loyal. But something I've kind of learned just from my little bit of research and understanding is that, like, and also something I want to say too, that I do believe that, like, one, it's very suspicious that a president has been in rule in a quote unquote democracy for 20 years. That's very fishy, right? Like, clearly there's some things that have changed and detoured from what is a stock A democracy, no? more or less from what I've gathered, like Erdogan and his administration was able to break that barrier between like executive and legislative, and you merge the two, which is something you're not supposed to be doing. You're supposed to have these checks and balances for a reason. But if you have a president and you let this president into the legislative arc of your government, well, then now a lot of bets are off, and he can set up this stuff in any kind of way he wants. I mean, not to mention you already have like what 5-year blocks instead of 4. That's already an extra year, and I think that's something that adds up over time. And you just see that like Erdogan has kind of made this hybridized democracy, autocracy that just works in his favor every fucking time. So when you go to the ballot box, he doesn't have to rig it. It's already set up in his favor. He's literally paid people off like to be one hype about his administration and tell the world, like who knows if that guy who said he would give 20 years is like getting paid for that or not. I don't fucking know. But like you have people online for that. You have people in the streets doing that. You just have people who have literally been bribed, like just like common practice, like a lot like how Donald Trump gave us stimulus money. Like imagine if that happens time and time and time again. So like yeah, like Turkey has like the lira is down as fuck. The lira went down even further when like the results of this election came out. It doesn't matter. People are still hyped. They're still in the streets. Like yes, Erdogan is my man. I love him because they only want to look at the good, and they just see the bad as like, whatever was going to happen. And plus he's a populist president. Like he is doing the things, he's saying the things you want to hear. You know what I mean? And it doesn't matter how your country changes over time. If you're still being fed the same bullshit that you want to hear, you're going to be happy with that guy. I think that's very akin to what Trump is doing. And honestly, it's a very good example of like Putin, just minus like, hey, I'm gonna go to, well, I mean, Turkey's involved in some shit, but like, you know what I mean? They're not being as loud as like saying the whole Ukrainian-Russian conflict, you know what I mean? So Erdogan's able to play all sides on a political level, like internationally, and then in his own country, he's just bending the rules as much as he needs to kind of make the ends meet. And it just doesn't matter that his fucking, policies are just running Turkey into the ground. And then also, I think the last thing I kind of want to mention here too, for Kamal, I really wanted to see him win, but I will definitely say, like, they kind of had like a last ditch, frantic, like, I don't know, like political, I want to say a political spasm where like, they tried to reach out to like nationalist voters during the runoff period, and they vowed to send back refugees and ruled out peace negotiations with Kurdish militants if Kamal was elected, which I think is a very bad move. I think you had the vote of people that got you there, and you're turning on that vote to try to get other people, and people already don't like you, dog. Like those people already weren't going to vote for you, so I think that's just not going to help you. I think that shot yourself in the foot, but I think it was a dead letter anyway. But yeah, I mean, I think this was definitely maybe the last ditch effort that we were going to get to maybe see, Erdogan get replaced. And I mean, didn't happen. But honestly, I really don't like the conservative bent that Erdogan has. He's very like, anti-LGBTQ. Very nationalist. I don't know. It's not to say that these aren't things that like America is not guilty of, but you just hate to see that shit abroad. You know what I mean? It speaks to that whole social conservative thing I've talked about before on this podcast. That is very icky, yucky. Speaking of though some conservative bullshit that I don't like internationally, let's go ahead and move along to the next thing. From CBS News, new law in Uganda imposes life prison sentence for homosexuality. Yet again, another update. Uganda's president signed one of the world's harshest anti-LGBTQ bills into law Monday morning. The law signed by President Yoweri Museveni calls for life imprisonment for anyone found to have engaged in same-sex sexual acts. Anyone convicted of something labeled aggravated homosexuality defined as same-sex sexual acts with children, disabled individuals, or anyone else deemed under threat can now face the death penalty. That death penalty part is important because I think that like it's kind of being like labeled as like, well, we're not trying to kill gay people, but if you do meet the criteria, you will be thrown in jail for life. So it's like, what? Like that's already insane for fucking starters. Um, and two, it's crazy that this is like there's 30 countries I believe in Africa that have bills that are similar to this, that and not to mention that this isn't like a new thing for Uganda. It's just this is them kind of hitting their peak. We've talked about how Parliament was queuing up this bill, trying to like cultivate it, have all the wording set, and the president agreed, but he didn't actually say like, "Oh, I'm definitely going to sign it." But he's like, "I like what I'm hearing," and then he signs it. So it has gotten a lot of condemnation internationally. Once again, talking about the U.S. here, Joe Biden condemned it, and then in a weird kind of funny twist here, Ted Cruz also came out and was like, "Oh, this is horrible. This is terrible." This is representative of Texas Ted Cruz, who is actively a part of just foul ass legislation that is not good for the LGBTQ community. But I mean, that being said, this shit is horrendous. It's definitely abhorrent. It is taking that idea of like these religious values and saying like, oh, like homosexuals are, pushing this agenda and they're trying to like abuse our children and like corrupt our people and all this kind of fucking bullshit. And essentially, it's really bad too because naturally this is just a bad law. Like it's terrible. But on the streets, it makes it even fucking worse. Like you have situations where people who, are, homosexual, they are gay, like they cannot live freely. They cannot live comfortably. They have to literally be in fear of their life. Like they say, oh, as long as you're just not doing a sex act, you're fine. But there's also like wording in the bill that it's like, oh, if you're like promoting it or doing anything like that, you could potentially be facing trouble. So, I mean, there are situations I've heard where people are doing like kind of scams where like you're trying to be on like a dating app or something like that, and you get matched with someone and you're talking to them and you go to meet up, and in that situation you are assaulted, people take your money, they all this kind of shit, and now you're like under potential ransom. Like anything could happen to you. And you're in the situation where you can't talk about it because if you talk about it, you could potentially get locked up because of it. Like this is some draconian ass fucking shit in a digital age, and it just makes me really fucking sad. Because at the end of the day, you're treating people less than for their life, for their way of living. It just doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, and it just seems like something that people are trying to queue up and like say, hey, we're doing something here. And it's like, no, you're literally doing something evil here. And you're just passing it, you're passing it off as like some like great legislation from your administration. And to hear like this administration, this Uganda administration, like defend themselves and by like saying like, oh yes, the international community might not like what we have to say, but we shouldn't like stand down to this. Like this is something we need to hold firm on, and like history will prove us right. Like type beat. I'm paraphrasing, but it's just so fucking weird. And like I said, this isn't like a rogue country. Like this is some shit you're gonna hear across the board, not just Africa, but in other places in Europe, here in the fucking States, like I've referenced before. It's very fucking frustrating. And for me, what I've come to is just the best I can do is talk about it. Is talk about these kind of fucking issues and hope that something gets done. Sometimes I try to add some fucking levity. Here it's very fucking hard, but I don't want people to forget about this shit. Like, yeah, it's not in our backyard, but in some degree it fucking is. You know what I mean? Like, as a person who lives in Ohio, I know that like motherfuckers would love this shit. They won't say that shit out loud, but there are politicians that would love to have this kind of legislation, but they know they can't do that shit. They know that they would literally be looked at as demons. But I mean, next thing you know, on Twitter, you have people like, I don't know if you've seen this. This is a bit of a tangent before we move along, but there's this thing I saw on Twitter, and they take the Pride Month like wording, and they condense down and highlight the demon in between the two words, and I'm like, bruh, is this as creative as conservatives can get? But it's just like these people like dog whistle that they wish that they could do what Uganda is doing. That's why it makes me so mad to hear like motherfuckers like Ted Cruz talk like they actually give a shit. Like no, man, you're part of a problem. Like you're doing the same shit. And for Biden's case, you're allowing it. You're not fighting nearly as hard as you should, in my opinion. I'm sorry. And also though, it's sad too. Like it's good to see people protesting in the streets. Actually, the picture I have in the thumbnails from like 2015, but there are people who are protesting. But it was also super upsetting and cringe to hear people like, oh, well, I don't like this bill, but I also like agree that like, that gay lifestyle, that kind of lifestyle is just not okay. And it's like, just get your head out of your ass, bro. Like don't bury your head in the sand on this shit, dog. Like this shit is evil. Like what the fuck? Get over yourself. I don't know. Anyway. Let's go back to America. I've been referencing it. I can't stay away. Let's go to Iowa. Let's talk about some Iowa shit. From CNN. Rescuers face a no-win situation. Enter a building on the verge of collapse to find missing residents, or let the apartments get demolished. At any moment, the remains of a 6-story apartment building in Iowa could come crashing down. The only question is if someone else might be inside. This is an apartment in Davenport City. Excuse me. And this building, it collapsed, I believe, over the weekend. And luckily there has been no reported deaths as of yet. But let's see, 8 people were rescued in the building within a day following the collapse. Now, they were set to demolish the building, I believe, actually today. But then they had to scrap plans because they literally pulled out a resident by the name of Lisa Brooks of the apartment that night. I believe that she was found on like the 4th floor of the apartment. She like called her family and they're like, oh my gosh, like my person's in there, and they were able to get her out. But that being said, there are still people who are unaccounted for. It's believed that they are still in the apartment. And, naturally, like, it's a tense situation because, I mean, my knee-jerk reaction is like, well, yeah, go get people in there. Like, what the fuck? Like, you know what I mean? But the apartment, like, it collapsed randomly. Like, that's part of the reason why it was set to be demolished. So they try to send more people in there, some like rescue crews, but they literally reported of shifting in the building as they were in there. So it's just not safe to send people in. At this point, they're kind of trying to say like, oh, well, we're trying to shift from the rescue to the recovery. We should just go to the demolition now at this point. But people are like, there might still be living people in there. Like, what are you doing? And let's see. Ryan Hitchcock is one of those who's among those still unaccounted for as of Tuesday. But Amy Henderson, a relative of Hitchcock's, said the family has accepted the likelihood that their loved one is gone, and supported the city's plans to carefully take down the rest of the building to prevent further harm. They going through, her testimony, just, her talking. And I mean, I couldn't imagine being in that situation. And for her, she's just like saying like, yo, like, I know these people out here who are protesting, they have the best intentions, but it's just not what we want. And I don't believe that's what Ryan would want. Ryan would not want people to be risking their lives for him in this kind of situation. So, I mean, I just couldn't imagine having to like say that. But I mean, I understand that, like, she's being honest about her feelings, or her family's thoughts, and potentially Ryan's as well. So I just, this is definitely a sad ass fucking situation. I know, a little bit on the internet, people are torn. In terms of like where I fall on it, I don't fucking know. You know, I'm not a first responder, and I feel like if those are the kind of people saying like, "Yo, we can't go in there, it's not safe," then like, what can you do, right? Like, I don't know. Obviously, though, I would hate to have a family member who is not here and potentially in that building, buried under rubble, alive, like, and we didn't do anything, especially with the Lisa Brooks situation. Like, that person literally just got saved, and if we went ahead with that demolition, she would have died, you know? Like, fuck. So, I mean, it's heavy-ass fucking shit. I don't know. I'm glad I'm not the one at the helm on that one, but obviously for the families, all those involved, I mean, shit, like, you can't even restart your life right now. You're literally in suspended animation until this is resolved, you know, if you're a resident of this apartment, you know what I mean? So, shit, man. Shit is rough all over. I got one more story to cover before I let you go. Ah, excuse me. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Now, this is from the New York Post. Not my favorite, but it will do the job. Ohio inmate Bradley Giuseppe, why am I doing that? I'm putting too much twang on his name. Ohio inmate Bradley Gillespie, who escaped prison 5 days ago, found dead floating in river. Police. So I mean that's more or less the update for you. Yeah, James Lee and Bradley Gillespie both escaped, and that was last Tuesday. They were on the run. Now, it turns out they were both in the car, which obviously makes sense, that Lee was driving, and I believe the car, like, winds up getting crashed, and both inmates flee the scene. And then Lee was arrested on the scene while Gillespie was at large. And I think he fled to the river and maybe jumped in. I don't know, fell in. Who fucking knows? I don't know. But he died in that river, I believe. That's what it's looking like. There's gonna be an autopsy. I don't know if we're gonna cover that or whatever. But it's believed that he was in the river for about 4 days. At least that's what it's the indication of the decomposition. Not to get too CSI or whatever. But yeah, so it looks like he probably died the night he fell in. And it was a wrap ever since. But yeah, that's a tragic end to this crazy story, crazy tale. So there you go. There's an update, a little local update for my fellow Ohioans, Kentuckians. And yeah, that's all we have for today. So yeah, like I said, we're back, baby, and we're so fucking electric. If you'd like to support this electric podcast, I have a Patreon, patreon.com/IsaiahNews. If you'd like to support, I usually do an extra episode every week. Sometimes, hey, you gotta take a day off. My newsies understand. But also you get a hot link to the Discord. That is free though. Just hit me up. And then also my newsies get a shout out at the top of the month. I say your name. I plug a project if you'd like. And then also, if you'd like to send any news to me, because I love that. I gobble that up. Might put it on the podcast. My newsies already know what to do, but the free ways to hit me up, IsaiahNews1@gmail.com. I'm also on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. You can leave a comment on the Instagram page or the YouTube comments. Also, if you're on the YouTube, feel free to hit that, that subscribe button, that like button. We love to see it. Yeah, that's the way. Like I said, hit me up for that Discord too. That's another way to contact me. I try to do a little meme stuff, community stuff there. But yeah, that's the episode. And I thank you so much for tuning in. And I thank you so much for being a friend. Hopefully I see you soon for some more good news. I love ya. Bye-bye. Mwah.